Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Cubist. My name is Bill Corey. I'm the Cubist, and I'm alone tonight, and it's weird. I know, right? Like, this is super strange. Ooh. And I pulled... How did I do that? Oh, it's right there. Look at me. I pulled a Patrick. Outstanding. Anyway, hello. It is Monday, and I'm back. It's sorry that we took a week off there. I had a friend come in from out of town that I don't get to see very often, so I wanted to make a point of getting to spend time with them when I could. So hello, chat room. How's it going, Paul, Matt, and Ben, and everybody? Good to see you. Yeah, weird solo show tonight. So normally when we do the show, the co-hosts and I kind of have a little chat before the show starts. I just realized my camera got bumped. We have a little chat before the show starts where we talk about the things that we're going to want to talk about. We talk about whatever the main topic is. But because it's just me, the topics is stuff that I have been wanting to talk about off and on for a while now. So this is going to be sort of a two-part episode, for lack of a better term. The title of the episode is Epic Campaign. The first half, we are going to talk about campaign games and some of my thoughts on them. And I want to pick your brains on that as well tonight. So we're going to talk about sort of the history of campaign games and the ups and downs of them and a couple good ones and not so good ones and whatever. And then the second half of the show, I'm going to talk about Eclipse Second Dawn for the Galaxy, which is the upcoming second edition of what I am famous for saying is my number one game, Eclipse. So hang in there for both halves of this. I think they're both going to be fun. As always, the chat room is wide open, and I'm paying attention to it today, and I'm probably going to be paying even more attention because it's me. So keep those questions coming. If there's anything that I said that you want a clarification on, go for it. This is going to be kind of a weird one because I don't have people to bounce stuff off of except you, chat room. So hang in there. All right. But first, as always, the first segment, we're going to talk about stuff that I've played recently. I'm going to start with a game called Robot Riddle. This was designed by Kevin Crane, who is one of the founders and showrunners of the Granite Game Summit, along with Kimberly Ribia. Artist is John Ariosa, publisher Baba Geek Games, which is Kevin Crane, if I understand that correctly. This was a Kickstarter that fulfilled a few weeks ago, I want to say. This is, for all intents and purposes, a storytelling, choose-your-own-adventure style game. So this is... And there are some exceptions to what I'm about to say, but it runs in sort of the same vein as Tales of the Arabian Nights or Agents of Smersh or Above and Below and Near and Far. Games like that, where there is a significant, as a matter of fact, I would argue it's probably the primary source of the game's quote-unquote hook are these flip books. And you literally say, okay, go to this page and read this entry and then make whatever decision you're going to make. Robot Riddle is one of those games. However, it does a couple of things that none of the other games, I think, do. Number one, it places a lot of focus on the storytelling. It doesn't tell you the story and just have you make a decision, which I think is most of what all of those other games that I described sort of do, is they read you, basically you read a passage and then you say A or B. This game specifically says it wants you to describe what it is that you're doing whenever a task resolution thing comes up. So basically it's trying to be like a light role-playing game in a box. And I think that it straddles the gap between role-playing games and board games in an interesting way. I don't know that it succeeds, but it's interesting what he tried to do here. Now, I'm in the interest of full disclosure, I know for a fact I am not the target demographic for Robot Riddle, okay? Robot Riddle is very clearly designed for families, for people with children who want to introduce those children to the idea of a role-playing game. I think that that is very clearly what Kevin was going for in this game, and that isn't me. As a matter of fact, I'm probably as far from that demographic as you can get because I grew up around role-playing games, as we've talked about a couple times on the show. So I'm like the opposite of this, right? Like I'm almost too far past the beginning of role-playing games maybe to truly enjoy this. I don't know. Maybe I'm not. I have no idea. But what I will say is that it was kind of a mystery, but I also recognized going in that I wasn't the target demographic. The game uses a very simple task resolution system. You have 3 stats, which I think are battery, scanners, and something else. I don't remember what the third one is. And those basically equal like your strength, your intelligence, and your like awareness or whatever. And you'll have a stat value between 1 and 5 on those. Whenever you have to make a test, you have to declare or say, I'm using this stat, here's how I'm using it in order to beat whatever the test is. And then you roll that many task resolution dice. And they will have successes, failures, and gears on them. And if you have gears, if you roll gears, you'll just gain more. It comes with little metal gears. And those are basically a currency that you can spend in order to use cards that you may have. And you'll have started the game with 1. And I don't remember, I want to say they're called advantages or traits or something like that. I don't remember what they are. I'm sorry, I'm terrible at this. And I can't even look it up because I don't own the game anymore. Spoilers. But whatever those things are, they'll have a gear icon on them. And basically the idea is once per game, you can spend a gear and place it on that card that you want to activate. And then you can use that to add a success after you roll the dice. So you can say, well, I didn't roll real well, but luckily I had this can of oil that I could use to lubricate the gears on my legs so I could run faster, so I could beat this thing in a race or something like that. And in case I didn't make this clear, it's in this fantastic world where everybody is a robot and you have pets that are robits, and all the robits have gone missing. So anyway, that's the task resolution system. Otherwise, the other decisions, there is a leader. The person who is currently the active player basically is called the leader. At any given moment, that'll rotate around based on the book. So the book will tell you past the leader becomes the next person or whatever. And you can, the leader might have to make an A-B choice, like, do we want to go this way or that way? Okay. There is also a bookmark that is a part of the actual mechanics of the game. So if there is a choice where you're really not sure, you can place the bookmark and then jump back to that point. So it's sort of like saving your game. That's in there as well. Like I said, I recognize that I am not the target demographic. So I'm trying to look at this review from the standpoint of, if I had kids, would this have done the job? Would this be something that I would want? And here's what I'm going to say. It had some production issues that bothered me, and Kevin is aware of this, and I feel really bad for bringing it up, but unfortunately it's a thing. Now, I know that it's getting picked up by somebody, and I can't remember. I wish I could. I think I've heard through the windmill that there's another company that's going to be picking this game up and re-releasing it. So I'm sure that these printing issues are going to get resolved whenever this next version of it comes around. But there were some kerning issues in the text in the flip books. Atlas. There. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, Atlas Games. That's right. There are some kerning issues in the flip books that actually make the text kind of difficult to read. I mean, it's not impossible. It just like adds to the cognitive load while you're trying to read this thing, which sort of, for me, got in the way of the narrative pacing, right? Like when you read, you want to read these passages in some sort of a dramatic fashion, just like you're playing a role-playing game. You want that to be in there. So, and the kerning issues messed with it for me. I like the fact that there are 3 different books, which is interesting. So you can play each book multiple times, and there is a scoring method. So you do earn points in the game, and the points are sort of to determine how well your group did at large. And it gives you a campaign book so you can write down how many points you scored in each thing and which robots you rescued and so on and so forth. It does some really neat stuff. And I think that it did those things fairly well. The production issues were a little bit annoying, but the cards are nice, big, like tarot-sized cards that have really pretty art on them, which gives you a good feel for who it is. Each of the characters, I think there are 6 characters that the players can play, has a nice picture on the front with their stats, and then on the back has a really nice couple paragraphs with like theme about you know, what your story is, your base story for that character. And then you get dealt a random trait. I think they're called traits. I don't remember. Gosh, that's going to bug me now. Maybe it's in the overview. Let's look while I'm thinking. Anyway, you get dealt a random trait sort of along the way, and so that'll be different every game. So it sort of forces you to mix up the storytelling. So, yeah. All right. So in the chat, Atlas, the game that I always think of from Atlas is Lunch Money, which was, I think, one of their first titles. That's the game all about Catholic schoolgirls beating each other up to steal their lunch money. It was very weird, edgy game. And I think since then they've gone on, they've done Gloom, Once Upon a Time is another one. Yeah. Their stuff leans very heavily towards narrative games. So this is actually a really good fit for that company. But for me, so if I was a parent and I had young children that I wanted to introduce to the idea of a role-playing game and get them used to the idea of cooperative storytelling, I think this is a buy it, if that is my specific mission statement. However, for me, and I suspect for the average gamer that watches the Cubist, this is probably a forget it. Maybe a play it if you're in the mood for a role-playing game but you don't want to spend a lot of time on it. I would say that this is probably, for me, it's a forget it. It's not burn it. It's not bad. There's nothing wrong with it. I just didn't need, I backed it because Kevin's a great guy and I wanted to see it succeed. And I like those kinds of storytelling games. I just found that the subject material was a little bit too immature for me. It leaned a little too heavily on the role-playing aspect. If I want to play a role-playing game, I'll just play a role-playing game. So this kind of leaned a little bit too far in that other direction. We're going to come back to campaign games leaning too far in the direction of role-playing in just a couple minutes here. So kind of keep that in the back of your head. But for me, I think I'm going to say that Robot Riddle is a forget it. I gave it to a friend of mine who does have a younger son because I figured that they might enjoy it. So I'm really good. I'm glad that I was able to pass it on to somebody that will get some good use out of it. So I don't regret backing it at all. I'm really glad it succeeded. Kevin's a great guy. And it is a really interesting idea. And I think that it maybe when the second edition comes out and Atlas publishes it and fixes the kerning errors, and the art's awesome. John Ariosa did a great job on the artwork in the game. I think it has a future. It's just not in my collection. So that is Robot Riddle from Baba Geek Games. For me, a forget it, but if you are a family that wants to introduce children to role-playing, I think this is a solid choice. So there you go. All right. The other game I'm going to talk about really fast that I have had a chance to play recently is Gloomhaven. I'm only going to talk about this briefly because I've talked about Gloomhaven numerous times on the show, but I'm just going to kind of keep touching base with this one again as I get it back to the table. I now have a regular group that wants to play Gloomhaven and is enjoying it, which is really exciting. We still haven't gotten very far. I think we've only gotten through the second scenario. We got through the first two, like the two that are linked, 1 and 2. So we're still not real far. I am not at the farthest I have ever been. This is, I think, my 4th attempt at getting a Gloomhaven campaign going. But this one appears to have staying power. All the players are really enjoying it. We're playing it with a full table of 4. And I enjoy this game. I will say that I think it is really, really tough. And I think that it's important if you go into a Gloomhaven game, especially when you are learning the game, to go real easy on yourself. The game specifically says you should play at this challenge level, but then it says if you need an easier play, go ahead and dial the challenge level down 1. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that. I think that I personally, and I can only speak for myself here, but I guess I'm going to make the assumption that the average gamer thinks about these things sort of like I do. Whenever I bust open a game for the first time, if it has like a basic game and then an advanced game and then a full game or any of that kind of stuff, I always dive straight into the full game with a couple notable exceptions. High Frontier 3rd edition leaps to mind here and a couple others. But I think that, so anyway, my point is that cognitive bias for me made me want to insist that I was going to play Gloomhaven at the recommended difficulty. And I think that's a mistake. And the reason I think it's a mistake is because Gloomhaven's selling point for many people might be perfect optimization and the gameplay of the hand management. Because effectively what it is a hand management game with a map to sort of determine why you're playing what cards. That's really what this game is. It's a dungeon crawler, but it's hand management first and foremost. The dungeon crawling is sort of the cards are driving it. And I guess that's sort of a different way to say it. I don't think that hand management game is what's driving this game for people. I think it's the story. And I don't think the gameplay should get in the middle. Gameplay shouldn't interfere with a story, especially when you spent this much money on the game. So I think now we are still playing it at the recommended difficulty level, but it took us 2 attempts to get through the second dungeon. And the first dungeon was real close. I anticipate us dialing down the difficulty when we move past this. So I think that just as the update, I'm still really happy I own Gloomhaven, but mostly because I'm excited I found a group that's enjoying it and kind of getting into it. They're all role players, so everybody has a background from role playing. As a matter of fact, one of the disconnects from them for the game is the idea that they can see the whole map and there is no like fog of war. Now there are apps that allow you to simulate the fog of war if you so desire. There are a couple tablet apps out there that help with Gloomhaven. We're not currently using any of them, which I found surprising because I thought for sure we would because it's so fiddly with a million decks of cards and whatever, but the custom insert handles most of that pretty well. So anyway, Gloomhaven is good. Yeah, I'm glad I found a group too, Ben. It was it was a lot of money that I sunk into that game. Can't just both last week. I wanted to do a show about both games and as one of the hooks, right? So I want to just talk real briefly. Sorry, this here a little bit. Real briefly about I'm being by Russian. I wonder why am I being by Russian? Anyway, I want to go back and talk real briefly about the hello, Chad. I want to go back and talk about sort of the history of campaign games. So for those of you, and I know that a lot of you will know this, but real briefly, let me just give you a super quick history lesson. D&D comes out as a sequel sort of to a game called Chainmail, which was a miniatures tactical combat game. You know, literally armies on a battlefield. Oh, got it. Okay. Well, thank you. Good. I'm glad it's back. My internet has been shady lately, so that's good. All right. So D&D comes out in the early 70s, and it is a game all about campaigns. The whole idea of the game is you create a character, and you play that character over and over and over and over again through multiple sessions, eventually gaining power and reputation, hopefully, and building a story around the group's characters and eventually telling this epic tale, right? No surprise. That's how role-playing games in general work. Not all of them. There are lots of one-shot role-playing games out there that are great. But that's sort of the progenitor for this. And then as the farthest back that I could see, and I know that there are other older games than this, okay? But the one that leaps to mind that I think was the first true board game with a real campaign to it, intended to be played over multiple sessions, would and by the way, chat room, if you can come up with a true campaign game earlier than that, I'd be again. All right, so I'm gonna be in the chat here. Check 2. All right. God, I wish I knew why my internet sucked so bad. It was working great all day today. It looks like it's okay. All right. So let's see here. Sorry that I'm breaking up here, guys. I have no idea why. I'm going to see if I can fix some of my bandwidth here. Let's see if that helps. I just bought a new router, damn it. That's why I'm so annoyed. I literally just bought this thing like 3 months ago. All right, anyway. So 1989 is when HeroQuest came out, and I feel like that was the first really great campaign game. And by great, I don't mean that it was mechanically super solid, because I would argue it was kind of not. But it was the first game that gave players a campaign experience in a box. And it was very familiar for anybody that had ever played D&D. There was no, you kind of knew exactly what you were getting. You were going to get, you know, there was a barbarian, a dwarf, an elf, and a wizard, you know, and everybody kind of, and the combat system was super easy. It was just how many dice were you going to roll? And I roll, you know, you roll skulls, you hit people, and if they roll shields, they defend. And heroes had better shields than monsters, and that was about it. And it was super mechanically simple, but it was pretty because it had a ton of monsters and big fake plastic doors you could put in the map. And in the plastic doors, no, I don't remember. Was that HeroQuest or Warhammer Quest? We're going to get to that in a second. Anyway, it basically let you do this awesome fantasy campaign in a box. Warhammer Quest was sort of the extra souped up version of that. That came out in 1995, and that added rules for days. And it really kind of turned it into almost a straight up role-playing game. It just had a lot of the randomosity that Games Workshop was really famous for in their board games. So things like Dungeon Quest, where you could just straight up die. There was a lot of random stuff like that. It wasn't quite that harsh, but there was a lot of it. And then, from what I can tell, there really wasn't much of note for a long time. Euro games kind of happened on the scene around the same time. 95 is Catan, when Catan's big hit. And this is when Euro games really sort of took over in the consciousness of tabletop gaming as a board gamer. And there really wasn't anything that really hearkened to the idea of a campaign again until Descent came out in 2005. So now we're back to another dungeon crawl game. And even Descent itself wasn't intended as a campaign at first. It wasn't until the Road to Legend expansion came out and it turned it into a campaign. And then from there, there was another sort of a break really in the full campaign thing until Risk Legacy came out. And then the gates opened. So from 2011, which is when Risk Legacy first came out, until now, there has been just a flood. I'm going to read these to you. These are all games that I was able to easily, and that BGG says are campaign games. All right. So I didn't even for myself. I literally just looked under the campaign game. 6 7 protocol. Your adventure card game 427 times to a million. Crossfire, Pandemic Legacy Season 1 and eventually Season 2, Harry Potter, Hogwarts Battle, Max vs. Seafall, the Arkham Horror card game, Near and Far, The Seventh Continent, Gloomhaven, Charterstone, Robot Riddle. Stupid stream. I wonder what's caused this. This is ridiculous. It looks like I have. Yeah, everything looks solid on my end. I've got a speed tester that I run every once in a while just to make sure that I've got a firm connection. And it seems like everything's good here. So I don't know. I wonder if there's something running in the background somewhere that's hogging up all my bandwidth. Well, hang in there. Thanks for hanging with me, even through the crap stream. All right, let me see if I can drop this down You don't really need to see me in high def tonight anyway. I'm not particularly pretty tonight, and it's just me. So maybe that'll help. Maybe we can get the bandwidth going a little bit there. Hopefully that helps. Sorry, we're going through all these things as best as we can. There's a lot going on here. So I don't know if you caught that list. I'm going to put, you know what? I'm going to copy and paste this. Now, this is not an exhaustive, perfect list, but oh, that's too long. All right. Well, unfortunately, it won't let me post the entire list into the chat. I'm assuming that everybody can still see/hear me here. Well, unfortunately, I guess I can link you to the campaign games family. Let's see if I can find that. One moment. Okay. So, stop it. Sorry, folks. Hold that thought for just a second. Yeah, it's an Eclipse stream. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so here I'm going to link you. This is a link. If you look in the chat here, that's a link to the campaign games family. Now, I didn't list all of those, but I just want to point out, assuming that everybody can hear me again, since like there were really 4, maybe 5 campaign games of real note before Descent and the Road to Legend came out. And then since Risk Legacy, so starting in the 10s, 2010 and forward, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Well, let's just say 15 because Robot Riddle is just now hitting. So we won't even count that one. 15, I would say, big deal campaign games that have come out in the last 8 years. And before that, maybe 5. So I'm giving you all this history, and I'm saying all of this for 2 reasons. Number one, because I think it's an interesting trend that maybe we aren't thinking about, that for some reason there is a market demand for games that tell an ongoing story. Number 2, because I think there's a weakness in this model. And this is Bill. Now we're straying off into Bill's opinion here. And I'm just going to keep going, and hopefully this is, so I'm not seeing you chat, so I don't know where we're at here. But again, I don't have like everything appears as if I'm up and running. So I'm just going to assume that everything's great. So yeah, that list I will say is not particularly good because there's a ton of promos in there. So I filtered through all of that. It's not great, but it's an interesting family, right? Like, I mean, it's an idea that somebody put in there. By the way, they didn't have Warhammer Quest in there, so I fixed that. I submitted a correction in there. But anyway, my point is this. I think that campaign games rely on this idea that we need to get a lot for our money when we buy a game. We need a game to have a lot of quote unquote content, right? We want to buy something. We get lured into buying these games because Gloomhaven has 90 some scenarios to play, or, you know, the Seventh Continent has 1,000 minutes of gameplay was one of their selling points here, or Near and Far has all of these character arcs that can be explored, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, Robot Riddle. I mean, it's not to keep picking on it, but Robot Riddle has all these different robots that you need to play through over and over again in order to find all of them. And so that's the hook, right? Like Seafall and all the legacy games, the whole idea is, what am I going to get to unlock next? What's the next thing that we're going to get to do? So you're playing the game. Charterstone is a great example here. You're playing the game, but are you playing it because the game is good, or are you playing it because you want to experience whatever the next step is in the campaign that you're playing? And I think this is the problem that I'm starting to have with these ideas. I think that a few times we have gotten games where the game itself is truly excellent and the campaign works with it. But in this case, I think I'm looking at the straight up legacy game. So as much as you might not like Risk is still a solid game. It's just not the style of game that lots of people in our little niche really dig, but it's a solid game. Pandemic Legacy is based on a solid game of Pandemic, right? You've got these games that are basically taking an existent system and adding a campaign onto it. Nothing wrong with that. Descent, Road to Legend, took an existing system, added a campaign onto it to add content to it. Those sorts of games work for me. When the whole reason you're playing it, however, is just to unlock content and the actual gameplay itself isn't particularly compelling, the game really, really suffers. And I think it's hard to get back to the table. Charterstone feels like that to me. I don't hate Charterstone. I actually enjoy it just fine. I'm just not super compelled by it. I haven't played Seatball, Matt. I really want to try it at some point, even if it's not terrible or even if it's not great. I want to try it just because I'd like to try it and I like the idea of it. But so I'll look at Charterstone as a great example here. The gameplay for Charterstone is not great. It's fine. It's a very, very simplistic worker placement game. There's really not, but you're not playing the game because the worker placement is really awesome, or at least I didn't. And maybe this is me. This might just be my opinion. That's why when I did all the promo posts for the show on Twitter today, I said, come tell me why I'm wrong. I would love to hear an alternate opinion on here. Ben in the chat says that there's a demand. It's a good way to keep a board gaming group together. That has not been my experience, though. I mean, maybe I would argue that it's the other way around. You have to have the cohesive board gaming group already, and everybody has to fall in love with the game at the same time. Because, like, okay, so the group that I have, there's only 4 of us. If the good news about Gloomhaven is that if one character or one player doesn't want to play anymore, then they can just drop out and the 3 other players could continue playing. But in a game like, for instance, Charterstone, you have, you know, this is my faction and I named the dudes and whatever. I don't want it, like, I don't particularly want to keep playing the game once other people have dropped out of it. Risk Legacy, I have yet to complete a campaign of that. I tried, I think it's 3 times. Pandemic Legacy, I finished with my ex-girlfriend because we sat and mainlined it in 2 days. And I'm going to probably at some point pick up a Pandemic Legacy Season 2. I might just play it solo. I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet. Or maybe. No. Yeah, here's the deal, Ben. I'm not. It's a much different story. It's not you. You're good. Don't worry about it. It's a whole different ballgame, man. I promise. Not pointing that at you at all. I think that you have to have the solid group to start with, and that group has to all fall in love at the same time. Marty, you're not wrong about Charterstone, I don't think, but also the story was mediocre. Yeah, Charterstone has issues. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I don't think it's a cohesive enough story to really compel you to push forward. I think that that's the biggest issue with it, is that it doesn't say, boy, I really want to see what's in this next thing. It's like, well, I feel like I should be opening chests. Or crates, I'm sorry. I feel like I should be opening crates because crates are how I unlock more parts of the game. And right now what I want to do is unlock more parts of the game. Not super interested, like, and that's the biggest thing, is that if the game can't keep you interested in the stuff you're actually doing, and I like Euro games, right? That theme isn't, you know, I mean, hell, some of my all-time favorite games, theme is sort of iffy on them, you know, or the theme is, you know, definitely not super immersive. Like, I definitely don't feel like I'm making cars when I play Kanban. You know, I definitely don't have, you know, I don't feel like a Mayan harvesting corn when I played Tzolk'in the Mayan calendar. I don't mind when theme doesn't get in the way. But my point is, if you're going to rely on mechanics, the mechanics have to be really rock solid. And I would argue that Charterstone is not really rock solid. It's fine. It's not bad. It is, I think, the definition of a play it for me, yeah, on my scale. But it's not so compelling that I'm like, yes, this is what we want campaign games to be. I don't think it's that. And I would argue that I think most campaign games aren't that either. I think that unless the system is really excellent, most campaign games rely too heavily on the what are we going to see next, and don't spend enough time on the let's make sure that the gameplay is awesome right now. I don't want to have to rely on unlocking the next thing to achieve enjoyment out of this. I want the thing that I'm actually doing to be awesome. And I think we need to find a better balance. There needs to be more in the middle between those two extremes. If campaign games are really going to be a long-term thing and not just a quote-unquote fad. To go back to my history lesson, Risk Legacy in 2011, Legends of Andor in 2012, Level 7 Omega Protocol, and Pathfinder Adventure Card Game in 2013, Shadowrun Crossfire in 2014, Pandemic Legacy Season 1 in 2015. And then all hell breaks loose. We get Harry Potter, Max vs. Minions, Seafall, Arkham Horror, TCG, all in 2016, plus more Pathfinder Adventure Card Game all along the way. 2017, we get Near and Far, Seventh Continent, Gloomhaven, and Charterstone, all four of which have, well, 3 out of 4, I would say even Charterstone. Just so we're clear, we can grumble about Charterstone all you want, but I think it's in the top 100 games on BGG. I'm just going to look this up, but I'm telling you, yeah, it's game number 95. So for all of the grumbling that you will hear that quote unquote content creators have been making about Charterstone, BGG at large thinks it's a great game. So, and I mean, most of these games that I've listed are very highly rated. I mean, Pandemic Legacy Season 1 was very famously the #1 game for a while. Gloomhaven is is it #1 now still? I know it was, wasn't it? Yeah, it's #1 now. So, I mean, they definitely have their fan base. And I'm wondering, is it me, or I need the game itself to be good? Now, here's the deal. I'm really happy with Gloomhaven. I enjoy that card optimization, the hand management side of Gloomhaven. I like the fact that it is what's driving a dungeon crawl instead of just hucking a bunch of dice and writing numbers down on a piece of paper. I really dig that. I still think that I would have rather he just included like a ChessX battle mat and a series of wet erase markers and maybe a few, the props pieces or whatever than all those stupid map tiles, because those map tiles suck and they're impossible to store and they're just a pain in the butt. That makes me insane. It's his passion project, do whatever you want. But the fact that I have to have a box that I could literally hide a small child in if I needed to is ludicrous. So I just wish that game was a little bit more efficient, but whatever, I still like it. All right. So that's sort of my thoughts on campaign games. I'm really curious and I'm going to say this for everybody watching afterwards as well. If you happen to be watching this on the back end, email me, thecubistpodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear what you think about campaign games and whether they are your jam or not, and whether that's the kind of thing that you really enjoy, or if it's something that you just don't understand the hype behind. I think that's an interesting conversation as well. All right, so let's get to the second half of the show. I've had numerous people reach out to me over the last few months wanting to know my thoughts on the second edition of Eclipse. Eclipse Second Dawn for the Galaxy is the official title of it. So it is a separate rating or a separate entry in Board Game Geek, which might be confusing for those of you that are keeping up with Eclipse. If you subscribe to the first one, you won't see this one. So here are the main differences. First off, for those of you, I suppose it's possible if you've been watching the show for any length of time, you for sure know my opinion on Eclipse. But it's a space epic 4X game with a very Euro feel. The idea is that you are one of many empires. You have a home world, and you have to go out and explore and exploit other star systems. Eventually, you'll encounter the other You'll expand into the other player character areas, and then at some point you will have to exterminate at least some of them because you'll run out of room. And the game starts to feel, here people, the phrase knife fight in a phone booth, I think is overly dramatic, but it does get tight, and there definitely does get that tense, crunched in feeling where you don't have enough room. So that's Eclipse. Eclipse second edition. The changes between first edition and second edition. And first off, I'm going to start by saying that I think it's really funny that people get so crabby about the fact that there is a second edition. There's been a lot of backlash on, I think that this is just a money grab. This is, we already have all of this stuff. And I'm going to start by saying that even without the changes, I think that this is a necessary move for that game because I think it's kind of run its course. And here's why I say that. First off, let's talk about the stuff that we know for a fact they're changing. And this is in the base description of the game. New graphic design while keeping the symbology. So they're not going to change the iconography. They're just going to change the graphic design to clean things up a little bit. An introductory short story. I don't know why. I mean, great. I'd give you some more theme, I suppose, if you need it. The Ship Pack 1 miniatures are being included in the base game. So instead of having the generic three sizes of ships and then the cardboard star bases that you got with the base game of Eclipse First Edition, you're going to get unique sculpts for each race, which is good. Miniatures for the Ancients, the Global Center Defense System, orbitals, and more. And the big thing, which is in my opinion, well, actually, they have tweaked the actual gameplay a little bit. And then the big thing to me is custom plastic inlays. So the game is coming with an organizational system in it. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to do a lot of screen sharing probably over the next few minutes, okay? So I want to start here by, yep, let's start here. So this, I'm just going to screen share this. And first off, if you want to follow along, I'm going to put a link in the chat right now of the BGG entry for this. So that way, if you want to, you can just go straight there and you can start digging around yourself. There's the entry for second edition. But now I'm going to screen share here as soon as I can get this thing working, because of course it's going to be a pain in the ass because the computer hates me at the moment. Come on, you can do it. Here we go. All right. So now I'm screen sharing here. My computer's being a dick. So this right here, if you can see this, is the control board, or what they are calling the control board for each race. So in the previous version of the game, you would have rows where the cubes would sit for each of the 3 colors of worlds. And now they have inset little spaces. And basically what would happen is that if you accidentally shoulder chucked your table, they would, cubes would go flying everywhere and everybody would lose track. Now we have little things that basically hold all of your cubes and your trackers in place. So, yeah. After watching a documentary on TI4, TI4 wanted custom ships for all races, but it was going to be too expensive. Yeah, but TI4, I think, is a bigger game. Like, I think there's just more stuff in that box. So that doesn't surprise me a whole lot, actually. Anyway, now I'm going to scroll down here, and here's the interesting thing, I think, and this is the thing that makes me really happy, is what you're going to see here. And let me see if I can zoom in just a touch here so that you can see. Can I zoom in? That's not the wrong. Is that the right? No, I can't figure out how to. All right, hold on. Let me see if I can just open the picture and make it nice and embiggened. This is going to be stupidly big. There we go. All right. So if you look at that picture, you're going to see a few really important things here. This is for the actual race. This top tray is the race. And then below this is the generic thing. And so this is sort of the 2 layers, right? And the cubes will sit in those niches. So this is per race. And then below that, you'll see that there are these 3 little indents. Those are your graveyard for cubes. And then around the outside is this groove that the 3 trackers for your 3 types of resources live in. And then all of this sits on a tray that's supposed to hold all your stuff. So all your ships are going to be in there, your starting hex, your colony ships, all that stuff lives in this tray. So the theory is that all of your stuff for each player pack is sitting in its own sort of tray dealio, which means that literally when you decide what race you're going to play, and I would suspect how this would work is that these are probably double-sided. So that way you can, because every color can play as either humans or an alien race. So I expect that you can flip this over and therefore play the human side or the alien side. And I actually can't read exactly what that is off the top of my head. But that's, I think, one of the big selling points for me for this is that it's coming with its own storage system. So, and I'll go back to the my lovely face. There we go. So that's one thing. Yeah, there's 10 ships, 16 races in TI4, which I have never played. But there in Eclipse, there are, well, in the base game, and I'm assuming, and we'll come back to the base game in a second, there are 6 player colors, and each player color can be either humans or an alien race. So there are effectively 7 races because everybody could play humans, or multiple players can play humans. Or each color can be a unique race. So there are really only 6 sculpts that would be needed in Eclipse, assuming the base game. Now, the expansion, Rise of the Ancients, included 3 more player colors and turned it into a potentially 9-player game. And here is my first, this is the first thing that I think is a big deal for Eclipse and why, just spoiler alert, I will be backing the 2nd edition at whatever the highest tier that you can back it is. And here's why. Base Eclipse is a great game, but it has serious issues. It had, and there are forum after forum after forum of argument about this, but there are certain strategies and technologies that appear to be extremely powerful and certain strategies and technologies that appear to be very underpowered. Certain races were viewed as being wildly overpowered compared to others. They even had to create some sort of a bidding mechanic to bid on the different races and start with basically handicap victory points if you were playing this in tournaments, because the math said that specific races were just straight up better than others. I must be a terrible Eclipse player because I definitely know there are some I enjoy more than others, but I don't know that I would say that this race is a clear winner over others, depending on what you do. I think they just need to be played differently. But there are a lot of people that have played Eclipse, a whole bunch that have very strong opinions on that. And I'm sure that if any of them were here, they would be happy to tell me that I'm wrong. That's the base game. Rise of the Ancients added those 3 new races and added a lot of technology things to change those issues from the base game. And really what it comes down to is I was never going to play base Eclipse again once the first expansion, Rise of the Ancients, came out. I think that the Rise of the Ancients expansion is an absolute must-have for that game. And what I expect is that 2nd edition is going to include most of the things that are in Rise of the Ancients that I felt like needed to be in, meaning the cost of certain technologies, the cost of certain improvements, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Ben in the chat, the race that is like the Borg, basically, you're talking about the Orion hegemony, the black race, where all of their stuff are like big cubes and whatever, and they have, they are actually regarded as one of the weaker races, according to the big stats, which I think is funny because I'm with you. I think that they're nasty in the base game because their ships start out just straight up better than everybody else's, and they can get off to a much faster start. in combat, but the like people that play in tournaments don't particularly like them. The blue race that is heavy tech is widely regarded as the top race in the game, which I could see. And the red race, which just starts off with a crap ton of money and some extra points, is the weakest, if I recall correctly. And then everybody else is sort of in the middle. So my point is they've learned from all of these issues that existed in the 2011 release of Eclipse, and they have modified a bunch of the numbers so that way you don't need to have expansions in order to get a good balanced game while still feeling like each race has their own advantages and disadvantages. I think that's a really big deal, because I think that Eclipse, if somebody just gets the base game of Eclipse, plays it, and doesn't know that there are other things out there that can be added to this game in order to quote unquote fix it, whether you think it needs fixing or not, there's a very real chance you could get a bad experience off of your first game of Eclipse and never want to come back to it. And I think that's a real shame, because it's such a fun game to dive into that I think, and I'm obviously biased, okay, but I think that this game is one of those games that does a great job of giving you an awesome narrative while backing it up with fun gameplay and dipping its toe in a lot of different gameplay pools, right? Like the mechanics of how you take actions of the game are very reminiscent of a Euro game, in that you have the influence discs, and you either have to place them on your actions to take that action or put them onto the board to take control of places. And the more influence discs you use on any given turn or have used, the fewer actions you will be able to take, because you won't be able to afford it. Your economy needs to grow along with that. And so think of it like bureaucracy, right? Like the bigger your empire is and the more that you do, the harder it is to keep everything running. And you can go bankrupt in Eclipse. So, you know, that is a very Euro-y feeling game. But then there is nothing more satisfying than grabbing a whole bunch of dice and blowing people up, right, in this epic space battle. When I taught this game to a friend of mine named Jeff, and Jeff was only sort of a quasi gamer when I taught him Eclipse. And he sat back at the end of that first game and he was like, wow, that was amazing. And I was like, really? You loved it? And he's like, oh my God, yeah, that was like playing Star Wars, the board game. Like that was an epic feeling. I'm building up my stuff, gearing up for this massive battle, and we had the big climactic finish, and it was everything that I was hoping this game would be. This is great. And Eclipse is really good at that. But if the mechanics, I taught him with the expansion, so I knew that all the rules issues that existed in the base game were no longer there. Without that expansion, I can't guarantee he would have had the same viewpoint, you know, and I think a lot of people don't. I tell people to this day, if you're going to buy Eclipse, buy Rise of the Ancients right along with it. Don't play one without the other. You need them both. A, because you want the variability. B, I don't know. I ran 9-player games of this before. It gets long. As long as everybody's actually paying attention and you don't have people with serious AP issues, it's not the end of the world. It's not as long as a game of TI4 from what I hear, but you need that first expansion. So my thought / hope is that second edition Eclipse is going to fix the issues that first edition Eclipse had and resolve them in such a way that when people buy this box, they're going to get everything they need to have a good, tight, awesome game experience straight out the gate. And I think that's a big deal. Now, having said that, we talked 2 weeks ago when we did the show about the Spiel des Jahres. God, I can't say that today for some reason. I don't know. Those awards, when we talked about that, one of the things that the judges said was that they were sick of feeling like they were beta testing games so that way a second edition could come out. And I get that. However, I would argue that Eclipse has been around for 7 years and did pretty all right for itself before the second edition came around. Like the fact that it is still a fairly living game. I mean, what is it published in, when was it originally published? I believe it's 2011. You'd think I'd have this memorized by now. It better be 2011 or I'm going to look really stupid. Come on, 2011. My internet's so slow. Yay, I was right. Okay, 21. Yeah, it's still ranked overall number 31 on BGG. So it is still a well-respected game. So I would argue that we are not we didn't beta test this game only so that way they could put out a second real edition. I think they just realized that the game at this point is bloated enough because all of these expansions and add-ons and whatever, that a streamlined experience that will get everything done in one box is going to be a good move. And I'm looking forward to it. Now, I am super collector man of Eclipse, right? Like, I have all of the expansions. I have most of the promos. I bought custom Litgo stands for orbitals and monoliths. You know, I have cool little acrylic dealios. I've got cube trays. I've got, you know, I bought multiple storage solutions for this game. I've had the game crushed because I took it to G2S last year, yada, yada, yada. So a lot of money has been spent on this game. I mean, you know, people have gifted me parts of the game in the past because they know how much I like this. And I'm still going to back the new one. And I'm going to sell the old one, which is a fine game, and there's nothing wrong with it. But I think I want to have one box that gives all of this awesome gameplay that I love so very much in a simple, well-organized way. So that way I don't have to reorganize it myself. Because I'll tell you what happened. I went to BGG, and I took Eclipse with me to BGG. And I ran a 9-player game of it. And it didn't finish. We had 2 players that did not know how to play and signed up anyway, even though I had specific. I mean, I did say that I would teach the game, but I also gave everybody links to all the rules, and they were like, yeah, I didn't have time. Great. So, you know, it wasn't an ideal experience. I also had a couple AP guys that, as far as I could tell, didn't even start thinking about their turn until it was their turn. And even we were taking simultaneous actions. It just wasn't working. There were a lot of times when people needed to ask questions, and I was trying to take my turn, and I would have to stop and flip through 5 rule books. Not kidding about 5 rule books, because expansion, and also all of this other nonsense, right? Like, there's just a lot of stuff. So I'm looking forward to a streamlined experience. But the set that I have, yeah. No, see, Chad, here's the deal. A 9-player game of Eclipse, if everybody stays on task and actually just focuses and plays the game, there's no reason it shouldn't be done in 5 or 6 hours. No reason whatsoever. Which, yes, is a long time for a game, but it isn't, I mean, an unreasonable amount of time for a game when everybody goes into it knowing it's an epic game. It only takes one person to ruin that, though, by being slow and taking their time and refusing to just act. And I don't, in general, I pick on people that have AP. I sometimes have AP, you know, analysis paralysis. I occasionally suffer from it myself. But I good-naturedly pick on people that have that issue when they play games with me. But I get it every once in a while. However, when you know that you're going into a long game, you cannot allow that to negatively influence the game experience for 8 other players. And I think that that's just a thing that Eclipse, when you go into an Eclipse game, a large player count Eclipse game, everybody just has to be on board with the idea that you need to be able to play at speed. But it's really not that. I mean, there are definitely longer games, a lot of them, than that. So I would argue that it is not nearly that offensive of a game. Hell, BGG doesn't think it should take longer than 4 hours. I think they're insane people. I think that 4 hours for a 9-player game is nuts. But they're saying that the base game, Second Dawn for the Galaxy, has 60 to 200 minutes. I think that's fun. I wonder if they actually timed that, or if they just said, look, we're not going to say 240 minutes because that's 4 hours and that'll make people crazy. But they're like, under 4 hours, that's not bad. I never believe game companies when they put play times on boxes anyway, though, because I think that's usually BS. But in this case, it doesn't have to be stupidly long if everybody stays on task. And I would argue that when people complain about downtime in games, it is 100% their fault. And I'll go down swinging on this one. If you aren't paying attention to what other players are doing when you're playing a game, There are very few games I can think of where you genuinely don't need to pay attention to what other people are doing on their turn. If you are paying attention, you will play better and you will enjoy the game more. If you choose to mentally check out of the game and play Flappy Bird or, you know, whatever, check your Twitters every 34 seconds while you're playing the game, yeah, it's going to go slow and you're going to be bored. But that's because you've mentally checked out of the game. I hate that argument about downtime in games. There are some games where it's a valid argument, but I think it's an easy out for people to use as a complaint about longer games. And yes, planning your turn on other players' turns is a great point, Ben. That's part of what I mean, right? Like, while everybody else is taking their turns, you should like be invested in the game that you're playing. You're sitting there for a reason. I would argue that you're going to enjoy your experience more. So I don't think downtime is a valid concern, especially for Eclipse with the dual actions things, but what do I know? Anyway, I'm going to be backing it when it comes out. 100% guaranteed. This is my all-time favorite game, and the idea that we're going to get a freshly tweaked version of it with better storage, just as good components. Oh, custom combat dice, by the way. That's interesting. I don't know how that's going to work. Normally in regular Eclipse, it's D6s, and a 6 is a hit, a 1 is a miss, and then everything else can modify the dice, right? So computers will add to your dice. So if you have a +1 computer, then a 5 and 6 will hit, so on and so forth. I don't know how custom dice are going to play into that. That's going to be weird. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how that mechanic plays into the system. So, yeah. Okay. So the publisher of the new edition is, you're talking about Colossal, right? This is another thing that I've heard, is that Colossal Games is running the Kickstarter in the States. So yeah, I have one of the biggest concerns that I've heard about this Kickstarter is that people are a little mistrustful of Colossal because they've done several different Kickstarters and haven't delivered anything yet. As a new company, that is definitely a little bit scary, right? Because you have what feels like the potential for sort of a Ponzi scheme going. I am in no way saying that I think this is what Colossal is doing, but this is how it could be perceived, is the idea that, okay, you know, we're going to use the money we made from this Kickstarter to pay for that Kickstarter. And then we have to do another Kickstarter to pay for the second Kickstarter, and then another one, and so on and so forth. We've seen companies that have had issues similar to that over the years. And I actually don't know the answer to that, Ben, on when the first Kickstarter was done. Chad's got you. So it was Western Legends and then Omen. See, this is why I love having you in the chat room, Chad. You just know stuff. Between you and Matt, I feel like there's a lot, and Paul, you guys just know so many things. It's good. You keep me honest. I appreciate that. Yeah, I don't know. Here's the deal. The difference, I think, here is that Colossal is just representing Lotta Polite for the Kickstarter. Lotta Polite, the company, is an established company that we know can make this game. They are working with Game Trays, another company that we know has an established track record. We've got the companies on the back end that are doing the heavy lifting of the design and publishing, the physical publishing of the game, are all established players. So Colossal is a new kid on the block, but I think all they are doing is acting as a middleman here, is my guess / hope. I do have faith in Lotta Polite. And yeah, established companies have issues. See Brass, sure. I mean, I would say that Roxley isn't doing too terrible here. I think that Roxley, if you're talking about Roxley, has done a great job with communicating with everybody on the issues that they've had. So, oh, and I know what I'm talking about. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. I think every once in a while, I know what I'm talking about. It's just those days come fewer and farther between as the gray seeps into my face from right here. So, yeah, no, anyway, my point is I will throw a whole pile of money at this Kickstarter. I believe in this Kickstarter. I think that whether Colossal's track record is 100% perfect yet or not. I feel like there are enough companies behind the Kickstarter itself that worst case scenario, I will end up getting the game that I paid for. I think it will take a while? Yes. I think that this is going to be a huge Kickstarter. I have a feeling that a lot of people are going to be getting on board with Eclipse again. I think there are going to be a lot of people like me that are going to get a second edition. I know that there is a very vocal group on BGG that's grumbling and wants an upgrade kit. They want to be able to upgrade to second edition with their first edition stuff. They don't want to rebuy all the things. I get that. I definitely understand. But I think that I have enough faith in the people behind it. So yeah, I back Deep Space D6 also. Yeah. And to be fair, Deep Space D6 specifically said he misunderstood what formatting the new art for the new printing was going to be like. He screwed up and couldn't redo the art in an exact port. You've held it in your hands. I am very jealous. I mean, if we're going to grumble about established companies having issues, let's talk about Greater Than Games and the Sentinels of the Multiverse Oblivion Kickstarter, which is what, a year and a half late at this point? I mean, we're still all waiting for that stupid box that they said they had designed when they ran the Kickstarter and then suddenly hadn't designed. Like, you know, I mean, yes, exactly. I love Sentinels of the Multiverse. You're an insane person. It's one of those deals where, yes, established companies have issues, and we are still, and this is the other thing that I think sometimes those of us that are big deals, or that can't, we're not big deals. We make a big deal out of gaming is what I meant to say. I think sometimes we tend to forget that we are still an emergent, very small industry with a remarkably low number of people that are actually making all these games happen. And while the popularity of the games may be exploding, I don't think that the number of people, like we've got 47 billion designers, it feels like, and there's unpubs and protospiels happening every other week, as far as I can tell, and speed dating at conventions and game design contests. And there's more games coming out than ever before. But I don't think that we have, like, the infrastructure hasn't grown at the same rate as the hobby is expanding itself. And I think that there's a lot of room for error right now. And I think that we still tend to forget how small this industry still is. And we should hold them to higher standards, okay? I'm not saying we shouldn't. I firmly believe that we need to start cracking down and stop being so forgiving of, as the Spiel des Jahres judge said, being beta testers so that way second editions come out. Matt, you're just trolling at this point. That's fine. You're whatever. You are allowed to be as vocally wrong as you would like to be in the chat room, sir. I will absolutely allow it. So, but no, we're still a nascent industry, and we are still going through growing pains, and companies are still not hitting it out of the park every single time. I think the video game market crashed with Atari back in the day because Atari just wanted to cash in, and we've already been through this phase. The cash-in phase happened early for board games. All the crappy cash-in games came years and years and years ago. We're actually getting halfway decent games published now, though, with good IPs. I mean, Battlestar Galactica and Spartacus and Firefly, and, you know, we've got lots and lots of good games, you know, Imperial Assault was it, and, you know, X-Wing, and, you know, we've had a lot of good games made from IPs. I think that the IP money grab that Atari went through was the biggest culprit of that. Well, and the fact that they made a landfill of the ET game, but whatever. All right, so anyway, that was a huge Bill tangent. In a shocking turn of events, Bill has a hard time staying on topic, mostly because of getting trolled in the chat room, jerks. No, I'm kidding. So anyway, that's me. Eclipse, if you want, I would strongly advise, if you have any interest whatsoever in the second edition, subscribe on BGG to that second edition entry, because they are posting a lot of pictures very regularly about new player boards and what they look like and the graphic design, and they're taking input from people as they see stuff. So like if there are people that are weighing in on these player boards going, I'd really like to see this fixed or that tweaked or whatever, they're actually listening and they're doing something about it. So I really have high hopes for this one, and I'm really looking forward to having just a box, just a regular box that's got the game that I fell in love with in 2011 even better in it. And I think that that's coming. So they'll get my money. It's a back it. It's a back it, buy it. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, that's Eclipse Second Dawn for the Galaxy. I would strongly urge you to subscribe there. We have a contest to resolve that I want to knock out really fast. We had 2 weeks ago during the Spiel des Jahres, we had a contest where Chris Ray, who absolutely hates Kickstarter, said that he was backing 2 games, and he wanted to do a contest that said what were the 2 games that he backed, and we had our winner. We actually had a few winners, but I chose randomly, and Marty I've never heard Marty's name said out loud, so I'm going to go with Warmuth. Was correct. She guessed On Tour and 1 Week Ultimate Werewolf. Those are indeed the 2 games that Chris backed. So congratulations, Marty. I'm going to, I need you to email the cubispodcast@gmail.com. Marty, when you see this, I don't know if you're watching. You were in the chat earlier. I haven't seen you say anything in a while, so I don't know. But email the cubispodcast@gmail.com so that way I can pass along your email address to Chris and he can talk directly with you, because he said he was going to get you a game. I don't know how that's going to work out. That is all on him. But thank you, Chris, for your generosity and for being on the show a couple weeks ago. And thank you, everybody, for watching tonight. Warmyth. Yay, there you go. Okay, thank you. Like Wormyth? Worm? Like the squiggly thing? Wormyth? See, this is terrible. This is great TV, everybody. Welcome to YouTube, where occasionally we spend a solid minute or two just trying to pronounce another human being's name. Boy. Anyway, thanks everybody for watching. If you've been paying attention to the other social media stuff, you'll notice that the live streaming rig has been rejiggered for like the Wormyth. Got it. Perfect. The live streaming rig is being rebuilt yet again. I'm reasonably happy with where it is now, and we're going to start doing more live streams again. I know I promised some last week and then had some stuff come up. My life is weird, but I rebuilt everything, posted a picture of it. I'm really excited with how it looks right now. I think I've got a good system in place. There might be even a test stream tomorrow. We'll see how that plays out. But don't forget, if you are a YouTube watcher, subscribe down there. There's a subscribe button. Hit the little bell next to it. By the way, when you click the bell, there are 2 levels of the bell. Some people don't know this. You want it so that way it shows the little sound waves around the bell. That means you get all the notifications whenever anything happens on the channel. Don't worry, I only post a couple times a week at most, so hang in there, and I promise you're not going to get spammed too much. Next Monday is the first Monday of the month, so there will be an After Dark show. Don't forget to tune in next week for sure, where you're going to get double the Cubist, double the fun. We are, of course, a proud member of Punchboard Media, where we all bring something to the table. Go to punchboardmedia.com to see lots of other great content. Punchboard Media just celebrated its 1-year anniversary. How awesome is that? So go hit them up. And if you want to, if you are a Twitter user at Punchboard Media, wish them happy birthday, because it's awesome that we have this great network full of content providers. And of course, if you want to support the Cubist specifically, you can go to thecubistpodcast.com, or the Pod Pledge link is in the description right down below where you're watching right there. You can make a one-time donation. You can make monthly, annually, quarterly, I think. You can buy merch on thecubistpodcast.com. And thank you for supporting the show. Thank you for watching. Don't forget, tell everybody everything you hear, and tell them how much you love the show. Tell them how much fun it is to watch live. That's the key. We all know this. Everybody in the chat knows that live is where it's at. So get your friends watching this thing. We need more subscribers. There are basically milestones that YouTube allows you to unlock once you get to certain subscriber counts. And so the more subs that we can get on the channel, the more stuff we can do with the channel, and the better It will allow the channel to function. It helps it actually get seen a little bit more when people search for things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you can't afford to financially support the Cubist, I totally understand. Believe me, do I understand not being able to spend money. If you can't afford that, spread the word. Tell people about the cubistpodcast.com. Send them to youtube.com/cubistpodcast. We appreciate it. Everybody have a fantastic week. Thank you so much for joining me. We will see you all in 7, some of you even sooner. Have a great week, everybody. Take care.